Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. They watched the sun come up. By then they'd been in a stationary position of repose for some time. Naruto, holding Haku closely from behind, watched the rays strike the flowers around them and thought he'd never felt more at peace. Haku was a nice warm weight against his front, his muscles were all rubbery with fatigue, and absolutely nothing troubled his mind. He couldn't remember the last time his brain had been so absent of activity. He felt as if he could stay there holding Haku forever. That wasn't meant to be, of course. As the village came awake below them, Haku and Naruto rose amidst sheepish groans and tired giggles, to begin their own day. Once they'd made it to the barracks to shower and change, they slowly walked the dusty road out to the west sector, hand in hand. I hate to ask, Naruto said after a while, face red. But how was it? Haku turned his head to hide his smile. Beyond words. Really? Naruto crowed. You mean that? Your stamina is nothing short of prodigious. What you lacked in skill, you made up for in sheer endurance, and the skill was quickly acquired in any case. I feared I wouldn't be able to keep up, Haku murmured with a grin. How was it for you? Are you kidding me? Naruto was getting his energy back, nearly bouncing as he walked. Ma, zing, he sang in a booming bellow. Thought I'd die, it was so good. Yes, you seemed markedly more skilled than you originally let on. Ah, well, Naruto averted his gaze. He didn't want to discuss how he'd had to practice so as not to embarrass himself. Wanted to make sure you were pleased, he muttered. Haku scrunched against Naruto's arm, nuzzling the bicep. Don't worry. Any more pleased and I might not have survived till morning. Kiba waited around the site early that morning, wondering if he'd see Naruto. Sasuke and Haku had been Mia since the festival, but if Naruto had handled his business right last night, he'd either be late this morning or absent entirely. He heard giggling in the distance, and picked his chin up from where he'd been resting it on the handle of his shovel. There, ambling up the road in the sunlight, were Naruto and Haku. Well. He grinned brightly at the two lovers when they reached him. Looks like people had action last night. Naruto released Haku reluctantly to catch the shovel tossed his way. Shut up. But he was smiling. Haku picked his shovel up with a blush, avoiding Kiba's gaze. Kiba didn't let it go. While Haku began digging the next hole, he sidled up to where Naruto was mixing cement and stuck his shovel in. You followed my advice. He hissed out the side of his mouth. Naruto peeked at Haku before answering, also in a hiss. About the bed. Yeah. Followed the girl's advice too, with the flower petals and everything. Meant about the clones. Don't remind me. Practicing kissing and ing with your clone was nowhere near as kinky as Kiba had made it sound. But yeah, paid off, too. What did I tell you? Kiba elbowed him hard. Where'd you guys sleep after? Didn't see you come back to the barracks. Sleep. Naruto frowned at the cement mixture. What sleep? We, showered about an hour ago and came straight here. You dog. Kiba howled in admiration. He lowered his voice again instantly. No wonder Haku smells all submissive. Naruto threw a hard glance at Kiba. Dude, why the hell are you so happy? So like you get off on me getting laid more than I do. All this hyperness is totally unlike you. Can't help it, Kiba grinned. My little Jinchuriki is all grown up. Now all you need to do is. Haku stopped digging, which got Naruto's attention, until he saw what Haku was staring at. Kiba followed Naruto's gaze, so that all three of them were looking at where Sasuke was stalking onto the premises, a scowl of purest hatred on his face. His eyes were locked on Kiba. Naruto noticed Sasuke's escort landing within hailing distance. That was something they'd never done before. Whenever Sasuke had been at the site, his escort had been close by, but out of sight. They took up positions now, postures tense. Kiba straightened up as Sasuke marched up to him, looked him up and down with barely restrained violence, then flicked his eyes to Naruto. Reporting for work, Sasuke bit out as he looked back at Kiba. Where ya been? Kiba asked. His grin was wolfish and entirely too pleased for Naruto's peace of mind. It was like he wanted to provoke Sasuke. Solitary confinement, Sasuke said. If looks could kill, Kiba would be dead a dozen times over. Sasuke's glare was potent with fury. Huh. Well, Kiba hefted his shovel. Haku, come do the cement with Naruto. Sasuke and I will finish digging the foundations there. Haku, who'd been watching Naruto's reaction to Sasuke the entire time, was relieved at the way he was keeping his promise, and at the way Kiba separated them. He caught Kiba's conspiratorial wink, and smiled in return, hopping out of the ditch as he did. Ooh, to say the atmosphere was strained would have been putting it mildly. As the morning wore on, Sasuke performed his tasks with tight lips and the skin around his mouth white with rage. Haku kept glancing between Sasuke and Naruto. Naruto forced himself to keep his eyes on his work, or occasionally on Haku, if he wanted to tell him something. Sasuke studiously ignored Kiba and switched to staring at Naruto and Haku, wondering at the new intimacy between their glances and touches. Kiba sidled up to where Sasuke was hammering planks into place. You seem tense, Uchiha. I can relieve that tension for you, just say the word. Touch me and you're dead, Sasuke snarled. Oh, I don't know, Kiba crooned. He deliberately moved closer, so that their elbows brushed together. Seems like you got in trouble the other night. Got your hands tied. What did you do? Try to come after me. Sasuke turned to face him, ready to spew curses left and right, but Kiba was ready for him. Here's the deal, he said into those black eyes. They were nose to nose. I'm legit interested in your gesture and I figure as long as you're looking over your shoulder, checking for me, you'll have less time to stalk my buddy there. Win-win sitch. Gimme the green light and I swear to God I will rock you so hard. The punch in Kiba's throat was delivered so quickly that he didn't see it coming. By the way, Sasuke's escort continued to watch their charge, chances were they hadn't quite caught it either, which was interesting. If Sasuke was so far above his escort, why exactly was he consenting to it? Why was he back in the village? Kiba-san, one of the agents called down to him. Is there a problem? He'd been knocked to one knee with that blow, but Kiba stood up now and worked at not coughing. Sasuke was hammering away at his plank as if Kiba didn't even exist, obviously determined to behave as if he'd been doing so the whole time. Fine. Kiba rasped out. He lifted a hand for good measure. I'm fine, no problem here. When the agent had settled into his previous position, Kiba walked up behind Sasuke and leaned over his shoulder on the pretense of inspecting his work. Try that again, he hissed in Sasuke's ear, and I'll arrange things so that you and I are alone here, your escort be damned, nay. I'll make you my bitch, Uchiha. Think about that. Then, because the action would be hidden by his body, he reached down, hefted a handful of Sasuke's butt cheek, and squeezed it hard, making sure to dig his nails in good. He slipped back before Sasuke could bring the hammer against his face, chuckling fit to burst. Good job, Uchiha, he said loud enough for the agents to hear. Though, if you ever want some pointers on how to really hammer something, ask me and I'll be happy to show you. I'm real good at hammering. He had to adjourn to the foreman's hut he rarely used, so hysterical was he after that. He could truthfully say that Sasuke was ready to kill him, and it did nothing but excite him all the more. Ooh. For a few minutes after he calmed down, he stood watching Sasuke from the window, and thinking of his behavior toward him. It was awful of him, and could be seen as UAL harassment, but damn it, Sasuke practically begged to be harassed. Guy was a great awad. Maybe I should tone it down a bit, though. Don't want to push him too far. If he went too far, he ran the risk of getting Sasuke thrown in jail for real, and there went this chances. Besides, this type of aggression wasn't like him. Normally, he and any other Inuzuka were mind your business and all mind mine types. Get an Inuzuka riled, though, or pique their interest you ally, and they became a totally different animal. Hunting. That's what his clan called it. An Inuzuka typically went after someone meek, unless the Inuzuka in question was female. He, however, tended to prefer other alphas. His interest had always been caught by the idea of dominating indomitable people. The encounter with the Suna teen had more or less been spur of the moment. He'd never actually hunted for a potential mate, nor had the urge. He could recognize now that he was being a bit too aggressive, even by his clan's standards. A small smile graced his lips as he watched Sasuke glancing around. Probably making sure he wasn't sneaking up on him. Sasuke then contrived to place himself in the ditch with Naruto and Haku, helping them dig. Naruto turned so that his back was to Sasuke. Haku watched while trying to appear as if he wasn't. Yes, a more subtle approach was definitely in order. Would throw Sasuke off balance even more, for one. For another, his own appetite would be whetted by the restraint, and thus be all the more potent when or if Sasuke succumbed. He couldn't wait for that moment. Over the next few days, Naruto tried his best to live up to his promise of forgetting Sasuke once and for all. Kiba, bless his woolly head, actually made that easy for him. Thanks to him bugging Sasuke, Sasuke spent a lot of time looking over his shoulder, so to speak. The one time he'd caught Sasuke stalking him again, Kiba had shown up soon after. Not that Naruto had stuck around to see what had happened, but it seemed like a fight had been narrowly avoided. Since then, Sasuke was too busy dodging Kiba to really bother Naruto, which left him free and clear to enjoy the new dimension his relationship with Haku had taken. And he enjoyed it often. Their lunch hour typically found them secluded in some unfinished building or amongst the stacks of lumber at the training grounds, engaging in a quick, hot round of ing, or some other UAL delight Haku cooked up. For all his demure ways, Haku was exceptionally well versed in hedonism. Naruto came to associate those shy glances with dirty thoughts, seeing as he was peppered with those looks throughout their time at the construction site. It was no wonder he remained in a perpetual state of arousal. Kiba had even had the nerve to comment one afternoon on using Naruto's wood to shore up the new wall he'd erected. They hardly spent the night in the barracks anymore. No privacy. They used the same locations they did during their lunch breaks, or else found new ones, but the nights most definitely were not spent sleeping. It was a wonder they were able to work at all during the day, so exhausted were they. Sometimes a night would find them too tired to do anything but go to the barracks and conk out. Those were the times Haku had to struggle to wake Naruto the next morning. Once or twice he'd been forced to go to the site alone. Naruto too fagged out to budge from his bunk. On those occasions, Kiba had taken one look at Haku's sheepish face and burst out laughing. Ooh, it was Konohamaru and Inari who broke this cycle. They stormed into the barracks one morning, several weeks after the festival, and found Haku turning away from a prostrate Naruto. Konohamaru took one look at Naruto's snoring face and brought his fist down on that blonde head. Oi, boss. Inari added his shout to Konohamaru's. Boss. They yelled. The y'all want? Naruto groaned. He didn't even open his eyes. The boys exchanged a fuming glance with each other, before bending down simultaneously and flipping Naruto's bunk completely over. Naruto surged up with a roar. Haku stepped back and watched from a distance. Before he could launch himself at them, Konohamaru planted a foot on Naruto's chest and shoved him back to a sitting position. Naruto sprawled on his, eyes irate and bleary. What we want is the mission you promised us, Konohamaru seethed. You've missed 3 sessions altogether, and 4, Inari said quietly. 4, and we want our training. Konohamaru removed his foot and stood back, arms crossed. Inari adopted his stance, not quite as brave as standing up to Naruto, but determined to back his new friend. Naruto got to his feet, scratched his head a moment, yawned, glanced at Haku. When's our next day off? In 3 days, Haku said. Fine. Naruto nodded around another yawn. We'll train then. Be there early, he told the boys. They grinned. This changed to cries of pain when Naruto plowed each of his fists into their stomachs, doubling them over. And you two ever wake me up like that again, I won't train you for 2 months. Haku watched them leave. When he turned to ask if Naruto would be ready to go soon, he found him crawling into the bunk next to his, and already going back to sleep. As Naruto and Haku were making their hasty departure from the construction site a couple of evenings later, Kiba halted Sasuke from following suit. Hang on, Uchiha. He waited till his friends were out of sight and Sasuke's escort understood that Sasuke wouldn't be leaving just yet. Want to talk to you about your work here at the site, he added for the benefit of Wolf, who'd drifted closer. Wolf checked himself and hung back. Sasuke folded his arms, literally unable to look at Kiba without his hands itching to beat him bloody. Instead, he stared at the small stretch of ground separating them. What? Kiba lowered his voice. No need to be irate, I've kept my pursuit to the bare minimum. You're stalking me. You have the nerve to complain. The way you stalk Naruto. Sasuke had the grace to shift his shoulders in agitation. What do you want? If it's not to discuss work, then leave me alone. He turned to go. Kiba put a hand on one muscular arm, halting Sasuke. Sasuke stiffened, as did his escort, but Kiba had already released him. What I want, he said, lowering his voice even more, is to know exactly what you want with Naruto. He told me you asked to be his friend, but, the way you watch him and shit. That's not friendly behavior. Sasuke blinked, processing this. So, he cut his eyes at Kiba, not quite facing him, but looking at him anyway. So, I want to know if you have romantic feelings for. Sasuke turned and began walking. All right. Kiba jogged a few steps to place himself in front of Sasuke. But if you're not interested in him like that, then what the are you interested in? Why is friendship with him so important that you need to stalk him and throw jealous looks at Haku every chance you get? Sasuke clenched the muscles in his jaw. He hated having to speak to Kiba about anything. Hated Kiba. Hated Naruto being with Haku, whom he now knew the idiot was Ing, and hated, more than anything else in creation, being back in Konoha. He was determined to remain silent until Kiba gave up, but of course he didn't give up. His escort was drifting closer, though, perhaps sensing trouble. If they could actually make themselves useful for once and help him end this conversation with Kiba, he would consider himself fortunate. But Kiba sensed them approaching. He pulled out a folded blueprint from his back pocket and opened it. He even went so far as to stand beside Sasuke and point something out on it, as if showing him something. Sasuke looked down at Kiba's grimy finger automatically, peripherally aware that his escort had stopped again. It's like this, Kiba whispered. If you're not interested in screwing Naruto, I don't see why you won't give me a chance. I know like-minded individuals when I smell them, so you can't tell me you're not into boys. Besides which, your scent smells ripe for a. You reek of frustration and your little jack-off moments you think no one knows about. Granted, you could be working off the idle schedule the Hokage has you on. This type of relative inactivity has to chafe something fierce, but I'm betting you also want to get laid. Now, unless you tell me you want Naruto and no one else, I'm going to step up my game here. You're a challenge, I freely admit that. I like a challenge. And I like the idea of Ing that butch of yours. Just give me a shot, man, that's all I'm asking. Not looking for love, or hand-holding, or anything like what Naruto and Haku seem to have. Straight Ing, nothing else. We don't even have to acknowledge each other when it's not happening. No one has to know but us. Sasuke kept his eyes on the blueprint. He could hit Kiba maybe 4 or 5 times before Wolf even sensed a threat, and could have a genjutsu swimming around the entire area long before that, but the magic words that stopped him were even now echoing in his brain. No one has to know. He was frustrated. On many levels. True, he didn't think about Ing Naruto, but the fact that anyone thought he was didn't sit well with him. Especially if the one thinking that was Naruto himself. He didn't want Kiba either, but again, if it was just Ing, he didn't see how it would detract from his mission in the village. Might even clear his head a bit. And if the truth were known, The few minutes he was able to steal during his bathroom breaks wasn't helping much. Still looking at the blueprint, he realized that the choices were simple: hurt Kiba or him. He couldn't recall ever being presented with two options that were equally attractive, but then he remembered the way Kiba had laughed at him, the smug looks, the gloating grins, and there was really no choice at all. Pushing the blueprint aside, he began leaving a second time. And when Kiba grabbed the back of his shirt, he finally snapped, spun, and punched him as hard as he could. His escort was on him a second later. The last thing he heard before blacking out was Wolf's strained whisper, "That's another week in solitary for you, Uchiha. One more infraction and your probation is out the window for good." A good 20 miles from the village walls, Naruto and Haku were putting the finishing touches on what would be tomorrow's mission for the boys. Haku stood back and surveyed the area critically. "I think the eastern quadrant could be better fortified, but all in all I think it's brilliant," he said. Naruto dispatched a clone to see to that task. He then reread the note in his hand. "Yosh, I think this is okay. What do you think?" Haku also reread the note, once it was handed to him. "Are you sure the middle part is clear? It could mean to go to the coordinates we prepped, but it could also mean to go down this line here." He looked at the map drawn on the back of the note, pointing. "In which case they'd be in uncharted territory." Naruto rubbed his chin, thinking and staring at the map. Uncharted territory was basically parts of the forest he and Haku hadn't covered with the boys. Technically, there was no stretch of fire country unknown to Anbu and Hunter Nin. "I'm going to leave it," he said after a while. "If they get lost, it'll give them a chance to use their skills to get back on track." "All right, if you're sure." "Yup, I am." Naruto grinned. "Can't wait till they show up tomorrow. How long do you think it'll take them to complete?" Haku carefully attached the note to the designated boulder before answering. "Konohamaru's impulsive. Inari's more cautious, less reckless. Together they should complement the other. I say, factoring in delays and any mistakes they make, that they should be done in 3 to 4 hours. And it's already tomorrow. They should be here not long after dawn, which is only 90 minutes away." Naruto suddenly snatched him in for a hard embrace. "Means we got time to undergo a little mission of our own, nay?" Naruto said. He nipped Haku's cheek. Was wondering when you'd get around to that," Haku murmured. Naruto released his neck, smirking at the hickey he'd left. Haku would need to wear his hair down to cover it. Then he glanced upward. "I don't think we've ever done it in a tree." Konohamaru and Inari crept onto the assigned meeting place 20 minutes before dawn. Silent and watchful though they were, they could detect no sign of their teachers. Inari pointed to the boulder in the clearing. He and Konohamaru approached it warily. It was Kei who picked up the note and read out loud. They flipped the piece of paper and studied the map. After a quiet high five, they were off. Watching from 200 feet up, Naruto and Haku grinned. Wolf signed the form with the agent on duty in the solitary cells, then left. Sasuke's confinement meant a week off from being his security detail. He could do with a drink and 40 straight hours of solid sleep. Too few people were elite enough to guard Uchiha, with the result that he and his two comrades often put in long hours. Sasuke heard the bolts clang home on the reinforced steel. His chakra had been drained, as per the rules of solitary confinement, but other than that the cells were unoccupied. 2 guards were on duty at the entrance to the underground rooms, but if things went according to plan, that wouldn't be a problem. Some hours ago, when Kiba grabbed the back of his shirt, he finally snapped, spun, and punched him as hard as he could. His escort was on him a second later, but right before that, he dragged Kiba close and hissed, "My escort will be a problem. This will have to happen in solitary, so get your over there before they finish doing the paperwork for my arrest." If Kiba was here, he was masked. He'd sensed no one as he passed the other cells, so it was likely his escort hadn't either. The cell's guards were negligible at best. The war had depleted Konoha's ranks of Junin considerably. But then, Tsunade hardly needed experienced men to guard solitary, the steel was 5 feet thick. Without chakra, there was no way he'd be getting through his cell. About an hour after dawn, as the guard shift was changing, Sasuke heard the bolt on his cell rasp back. Kiba slipped inside and closed the door behind himself. When he turned to face Sasuke, his face was lit with pride. Dude, this place is a Ing fort, you could have warned me. Sasuke uncoiled from his cot. What do you think solitary is? Took you long enough. Ballsy plan, though, gotta hand it to you. He grinned. Figure we have a few hours before they give you your daily meal. His eyebrows rose in a wicked question. Sasuke closed the distance, fisted a hand in Kiba's shirt and slung him toward the bed. Or at least, he tried to. Having his chakra drained didn't affect his physical strength, but Kiba caught his hand and had it twisted behind his back in a slick move. Sasuke excelled at taijutsu as well, but Kiba had him shoved face first to the nearest wall barely a second later. By the time it registered that Kiba was actually stronger than he was, his surprise had been used against him. Kiba leaned down to his ear. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Seems you thought you were in charge, Uchiha. I'm going to take great pleasure in disabusing you of that notion. Spread him. Sasuke remained still. You. Not likely. Kiba kicked his legs apart for him. It was all he could do not to yell in outrage at feeling his head yanked back by his hair. A moment later, he felt Kiba's hand begin undoing his pants with short, sharp tugs. Sasuke bucked hard, throwing Kiba back a few steps. He turned around angrily, but was brought up short by the sight of Kiba's face. Kiba's fangs were bared. Sasuke had a brief thought that Kiba might bite him, but this was completely eclipsed by Kiba himself. Though Chunin, Kiba never wore the uniform. He could most often be found in a loose denim shirt and construction pants. In the brief time Sasuke's back had been to him, Kiba had managed to remove his shirt and undo the top button of his pants. The image he presented was so far from what Sasuke thought he knew of Kiba that all he could do was stare, mind blank, as odd details caught his attention. The denim shirt had hidden just how wide Kiba's shoulders were, and how ropey with muscle his arms were. Likewise, the thickness of his neck had been covered by the shirt's collar. Kiba's physique wasn't bull-like, but it was more substantial than Sasuke's, and that much was noted immediately. Then there was the way Kiba stood, hands down, head lowered, teeth bared, and feet placed wide apart. Like he hadn't cared for the way Sasuke had shoved him just now. Like he meant business. It occurred to Sasuke that he was alone in the room with this person, no chakra, and no hope for escape without the risk of being incarcerated permanently. Suddenly, agreeing to meet Kiba here didn't seem like such a good idea. Kiba clearly had erroneous notions regarding their arrangement, and he himself was currently unable to light so much as a match in his defense. His eyes slid to the unlocked cell door. I wouldn't try that if I were you. Kiba's voice was a soft rasp that abraded Sasuke's nerves unpleasantly. His skin humped up into gooseflesh. I've changed my mind, he said. It disgusted him the way Kiba's measured step in his direction made him take an automatic step back. He resolved to stand his ground, jail or no jail. Get out, he says. Kiba continued to stroll in his direction, voice still hissing through the dank air. He paused when he was a foot from Sasuke, and just stood there, looking at the alert black eyes, and the tightly compressed lips. You smell scared, Uchiha. I said. Kiba's hand landed with devastating gentleness directly on Sasuke's crotch. It squeezed, just as gently, so that Sasuke's mouth continued to move, but no sound came out. What was that? Kiba asked. Sasuke clamped a hand over Kiba's, but Kiba's hand tightened imperceptibly. He rolled his balls, massaged them, and thus leached all the strength out of him. Sasuke brought his other hand swinging in a hard and fast punch, only to have that wrist grabbed and pinned to the wall. He lifted a leg to kick, and Kiba's knee came up smoothly to insert itself between his now parted legs. It settled with a dull impact under his balls and continued to rise, lifting him to his toes. There was suddenly no air in the room. That knee rocked against him. In a confusion of heat and fury, he was dimly aware of fighting Kiba, of being too weak to be effectual, of being embarrassed and shamed to his core, and of Kiba's entire body coming to rest against his. Amidst the sudden lethargy that followed this unthinkable contact, he realized that all of that had happened and he'd never been released from the wall. That knee hadn't budged 1 inch. And he was panting. Kiba's face was near his breath hot on humid. What? He smiled. No more fight, Uchiha. Seeing those teeth, and feeling his wrists pinned above his head, something in Sasuke's gut turned over with a terrifying lurch. This isn't happening, he tried to say. But Kiba was kissing him hard. For a minute, maybe two, he could feel those claws digging into his wrists as he struggled to be released. But then Kiba let go of one wrist to plunge his hand down the front of his pants. Sasuke felt himself handled roughly, and his entire body shuddered in need. His hands were sliding down the wall now. One closed behind the muscled nape of Kiba's neck and furiously dragged him closer, deepening the kiss. Kiba pulled back with an effort, to lean his forehead against Sasuke's. He was pleased to feel the calloused palm on his neck, as well as the other hand clamped hard in his hair. When his breathing was under control, he stepped back and adjusted his aching. Sunlight caught in a stray bead of sweat as it rolled over one bronze shoulder. Small as it was, it seemed to embody all the beauty and intimacy of the moment. Haku stared at it as Naruto entered him yet again. His was slick with sweat and cum, the penetration shivered along his nerve endings deliciously. Weak in every limb, he arched on a sigh of sharp pleasure. Naruto, letting out an answering sigh, settled onto him, now sheathed to the hilt. Haku leaned up and licked the drop of sweat away, then lingered to softly on the shoulder as well. His lover hummed at him, eyes half closed and hazy with desire. For a while, he stared up into those blue eyes, made light by the sun, and felt Naruto pulsing deeply within him. Even without movement, the excitement climbed in Haku. It made his heart stutter, and his chest rise and fall. Those eyes. They did it to him every time. Made him hard. Made his balls tighten until, when Naruto finally began moving, Haku was holding back his climax with an effort. The sun warmed him nearly as well as Naruto's attentions did, the way it bathed their patch of grass. Letting his head fall back against Naruto's forearm, he gave himself up to the sensory input all around him. The heat of the day, and the cool, soft grass. The gentle breeze, and the music of birds and insects. Above all, the sound of Naruto's breathing, the feel of his arms around him, and his body inside him. He had to close his eyes, it was so good. The smell of Naruto's skin was all over him, surrounding him in its unique aroma. He'd come to associate Naruto's scent with the steamy kisses, harsh breathing, and wonderfully rough caresses that marked his love-making. He had only to catch a whiff of it on the wind, and he'd be hard and panting. And now, beset with Naruto's tight thrusts, his entire body jarred again and again, and with the feel of Naruto's bunched back muscles beneath his hands, Haku thought this was as close to paradise as anyone could get. This was perfection. Naruto loving him with increasing ferocity, all youthful ardor and eagerness. Ooh. Seeing Haku's impending climax, Naruto leaned up and slowed his pace. A lazy smile stretched his lips. Good. Haku's cat-like smile said it all. Naruto dropped a sweaty kiss on his lips. Love you, he whispered. He rode out the sudden frenzy of shudders and sighs those words brought out of Haku, before gradually speeding up again to find his own release. Right before he did, Haku's nails raked 4 long furrows down his back. He collapsed with a small yelp, utterly spent. Haku spent a few moments rubbing his hands up and down the length of Naruto's back. He loved this time afterward, when Naruto's body was a crushing weight, and his was sore and full of warmth. He waited until Naruto was almost asleep, before nuzzling his ear. More, please. After, when they lay sweaty and gasping, Haku rolled to an elbow and tiredly propped his head on a hand. He studied what he could see of Naruto's face for several blissful moments, Naruto had the back of one wrist over his eyes. This close, the smattering of faint freckles across the bridge of Naruto's nose was visible, as were the white blonde hairs on his upper lip. The lips themselves were an inviting pink, chiseled, and infinitely kissable. Haku leaned down and indulged himself. Hee hee. Naruto sighed around a smile. 4 times this morning. You can't want another round just yet. Dude. Haku laughed. No, not yet. He bit his lip, debating on whether or not to say anything. Naruto. He'd long since dropped the honorific now that they were intimate. How would you feel about me staying in the village? Naruto didn't answer immediately. He was completely still in his exhaustion, one hand resting on his bare chest, the other still over his eyes, but Haku sensed that he was wide awake and thinking. Permanently? Naruto asked. Yes. Oden-san and his wife have petitioned the Hokage for citizenship. For me as well. I see. I think you know I'd be really happy about that. There was puzzlement in his voice now. Really? Because, I was sort of wondering what we are. What we are? Well, yes. I know that Kiba-san seems to be the only one to really know about us. And Sakura. Ino. They won't tell, though. Right. And I know that we've avoided labels and such, but I was wondering, what we are to each other. Now Naruto dragged his hand away from his eyes to turn his head. He squinted at Haku in the sunlight, brows knit in confusion. I don't get it. Haku swallowed. Am I your boyfriend? Are we dating? I know we're lovers, but, he broke off as the frown smoothed out and Naruto pointedly put his hand back over his eyes. He watched the muscle in Naruto's jaw flex with an answering nod of discomfort in his belly. I know you're a very private person, he ventured when a minute had passed. Is this something you need? Naruto said. To have it spelled out. Haku ducked his head. He wished he'd never brought the subject up. Yes. There was silence for what seemed like a long time. I don't know if I'm ready for all that, Naruto said at last. Why not? Why do you need to have it stated before the whole world? I love you, you love me, we all the time. What do you need beyond that? Security. To know that I have a hold on your heart. I would just like to be able to say that you're my boyfriend. To have our relationship defined. Naruto drummed his fingertips on his chest, thinking. This had to be something that was understood by people who dated, he concluded. After all, Sakura and Ino repeatedly asked him if he and Haku were full-on boyfriends yet. Come to think of it, Kiba had made a comment not too long ago. He'd been watching Haku lift a stack of lumber, and marveling at how such a slight man could be so strong. I don't get what you see in him, personally, Kiba had said. He's way too girly and pretty for me, but I see other guys around the village checking him out, so you must have good taste. Don't worry, though, it might not be official that you and he are an item, but I can smell how well he's marked. I'll chase the other hounds away, if you want. He'd been shocked at the feeling of jealousy Kiba's information had called up, as well as touched that his friend would do that for him. To chase the other guy's way himself would have called attention to him and Haku, and so far no one seemed to really notice how often he and Haku disappeared to be alone. Still, it wasn't just that he liked to keep his business in his own backyard, labels felt binding. They brought all manner of things into the relationship that Naruto was privately too unprepared for. Such as the possibility that once they were established as a couple, and all the obligations that entailed were shouldered, Haku might leave. As much as he loved Haku, he didn't think he could take that, not after years of Sasuke. Labels made everything more serious, and thus more painful should things get screwed. But he's staying in the village. I need to think about it, he hedged finally. What is there to think about? If we love each other. Haku. I said I'd think about it. Come on man, gimme a break. You just sprang this on me, let me digest it a couple days. But Haku proved to be as shrewd as ever. Is it Sasuke? All the rejection you received at his hands. Naruto slowly uncovered his eyes to look at him again, then propped himself on his elbows. What's that supposed to mean? Haku paused. Nothing. He turned over to lie down and sleep. Please forget I brought this up. I'm sorry. He didn't sound sorry, Naruto thought as he stared at Haku's back. When it became clear that no more would be said, he flopped back down and moodily stared at the canopy of leaves. Why did everything always come back to Sasuke? He'd thought that he and Haku were doing good. They were completely into each other, with next to no interference from Sasuke now. He'd kept his promise, too, about not paying Sasuke any attention. Hard for him too, anyway, seeing as how Kiba dogged Sasuke's steps so much. Kiba was being extra diligent in pursuing Sasuke, if the truth were known. Naruto hadn't failed to notice that, or how in Sasuke's face Kiba was at the sight. Sasuke's attention was completely diverted now. I should be grateful, Naruto thought. After all, Kiba's intervention gave Naruto the time and opportunity he needed to be with Haku the way he wanted to be. He should be happy. But it hurt. Naruto snuck a guilty glance at Haku's back. Apparently his resentment over Sasuke had shown. He'd thought he'd kept that truth to himself, but Kiba chasing Sasuke hurt a lot. No one chased Sasuke but him. Naruto. That was it. Sakura had for a while, but she'd given up, and then it had just been him and Sasuke. Any diversion from that dynamic just felt wrong. He could appreciate how it was for him to hate Sasuke being back, hate the way he'd stalked him, and still be jealous when someone else inserted themselves into the equation. He could. But that didn't make it hurt any less. And as usual whenever he thought of Sasuke these days, he kept coming back to that offer of friendship. He thought more and more about accepting it, and thus redirecting Sasuke's attentions, and that never failed to make him feel like the worst shit ever. Haku didn't deserve that, but he couldn't seem to help how he felt. Boyfriend. Yeah, right, I'm not even a good friend. They slept. When they woke, it was to find the sun past its zenith, and the forest completely still. No sound entered the shadowed clearing, and the breeze had become more in keeping with what one would expect of that time of year. These things by themselves weren't cause for alarm, but Haku sat up immediately, senses on high alert. Naruto. Moo. He was always slower to come around once he'd been deeply asleep. Haku looked around, frowning. The boys aren't back. Something feels off. Naruto spent another few seconds smacking his lips and rubbing his eyes, until his senses finally snapped to full alertness. He was on his feet that fast, head swiveling as he took in the clearing as well. His brows lowered. Could they have come back and seen us, then left? Haku got to his feet, pulling on his kimono. I don't know. I'd think they'd want to claim their reward for completing the mission, don't you? Naruto glanced at the tiny chest of money, weapons, and other goodies he and Haku had collected as the reward. Yeah. Then he looked at Haku. 3 clones each. Haku nodded. Hey, Naruto said as Haku placed his hands in preparation for the seal. We good. The stern expression on Haku's face softened. Of course. You sure? I meant what I said about thinking it over. I've never had a boyfriend, or been someone's boyfriend, and… Naruto, it's alright. Let's just find the boys. We can discuss this later. Alright. Their clones appeared with a poof, and spread out with the originals to begin searching. What is that? Inari asked in a small voice. I don't know. Konohamaru shivered at the deep humming sound. It sounded as if it was coming from below the ground, and it set their very bones to vibrating. The sun was setting. They'd been lost for hours now. Worse, they had no idea how to get back to their starting point. They'd tried everything, from retracing their steps, to sending clones out to scout for them, with the result that they were now exhausted, and scared to boot. The first part of the mission had gone fine. They'd encountered the obstacles they'd been expecting to, but they'd also used up most of their chakra in their battle excitement. And they'd lost most of their weapons. This part of the forest they were in was dark with foliage and shadows, but sparse of trees. A sea of ferns reached waist high on them, the leaves of which trembled with that unearthly hum. Compounding the spookiness of their surroundings was a low, thick mist that obscured just about everything. The air was a grayish-green haze. The odd ray of weak sunlight lanced through isolated gaps in the haze, so there was some illumination, but it wasn't much. And it wasn't enough to dispel the mist, not setting as the sun was. They shivered. Wish we had the map, Inari said shakily. Konohamaru nodded. The map had been toasted in a stray Kaiten he'd thrown to get them out of a pinch. At the time, it had seemed like a worthy sacrifice. They'd operated since then on what he could remember of the note in the map. He was grateful that Inari chose not to blame him for their current predicament, but he already blamed himself. I should have been more careful with it. We're Ed without it. Got no clue where the hell we are. I keep saying we're miles and miles southwest of the village, but you won't listen, Inari quavered. Because there's no way you can know that from a goddamn tree. I do so know, Inari insisted, but Konohamaru wasn't listening. He never listened. He thought that just because he was ranked, and had studied with real ninja, and had seen battle, that he knew all there was to know about everything under the sun. It was a simple thing to notice that the larger trees surrounding the village were a species of hardwood. He couldn't be sure of the type, because they'd essentially been created by the first Hokage, but he knew they didn't reproduce with flowers. The trees they'd been passing for the past couple of hours were softwood. Any carpenter worth his tools could see that. And seeing that he'd spent several months handling the various woods that came through Konoha, he could also say, with certainty, that the nearest batch of softwoods was in a section of swampy land about 40 miles southwest of the village. If he had a proper map, he could show Kay exactly where they were, but when he tried to draw one in the dirt, Kay had gotten impatient and rubbed it out with his foot. We need to keep moving, he'd said. Inari had given up then, and tried to hope for the best. The humming escalated to a high-pitched whine just then, setting their teeth on edge, before settling back to a low throb. Inari wiped sweat off his brow, and used the action to discreetly remove the evidence of his tears. This situation wouldn't scare him half as bad if Boss or Haku were with them, but all he had was Konohamaru. Stupid, arrogant K, and his hands were shaking just as bad as his own were, he saw. They needed control of the situation, Konohamaru reasoned. He stared west, at where the forest seemed to be pitch black despite the fact that it was still more or less day. The ground dipped in that direction, as if there was a large crater there. The hum seemed to come from this dark depression. He was torn by a sudden desire to investigate, and the equally strong urge to run in the opposite direction. You think maybe that sound is from people? He asked at length. Some kind of machine they made. Inari caught on quickly. Maybe. And maybe someone there can tell us how to get back. Konohamaru chewed his lip, swallowed painfully, carefully looked around in a circle to make sure there was no alternative, no other person they could ask. Worth a shot, I guess. Come on. He really didn't want to go towards that sound. One boy's sweaty hand groped for the others and found it ready and waiting. Thus united, they crept westward. A small grunt left Sasuke as he came a third time in the wadded-up denim that was Kiba's shirt. When the last spurt had left him, and he'd suffered through the final shudder, he brought the material to his face and viciously spat into it for good measure. Then he threw it on the floor, and repeatedly wiped his shoes on it. Done, he dropped himself onto his cot. Since Kiba had walked out, Sasuke had fumed in silence. The needs that dog-faced bastard had left him with tempted him to let loose a stream of insults, but there was no one to hear. Besides, keeping the words inside made him feel as if he was in control. No, he didn't break the silence by so much as a word, but he stared at the ceiling and mentally outlined Kiba's crimes. The list was long, beginning with the way he hadn't had a moment's peace in weeks. He counted out the many unsolicited touches, insults given, and implications made. The worst, though, the very worst thing was the way Kiba had all but led Sasuke to incarcerate himself under the false belief that they would. That fang-faced, dog-breath motherer had played him. That was utterly and completely unforgivable. He would see Kiba dead for it. In fact, he was so enraged that he could feel a tiny trickle of his chakra returning. His pathways were likely openings as a result of his fury. Orochimaru had done some research into the theory that high adrenaline levels could reverse chakra damage or impairment. A tight smile graced Sasuke's lips. Perfect. When next Kiba came sniffing, he'd have a little surprise waiting for him. He wasn't scheduled to have his chakra drained again until morning. At this rate, he'd be at full strength in a few hours. He could not imagine what he'd been thinking, to allow the beast the hope of touching him. Of topping him. He had never let frustration rule him before. An image of himself leaving the village to meet with Orochimaru's Sound 4 came to him. Right. Well, that had been a lot more than frustration. The point was that his situation now could have been avoided somehow, he was sure of it. Despite his Anbu detail, and Naruto's behavior, and Kiba's effrontery, Sasuke was sure that had he bent his mind to the task properly, all would have been solved to his satisfaction. But no, he'd been too eager to use Kiba's body to think at all. Ridiculous. Remembering the scene with Kiba only a few hours ago, Sasuke felt his muscles tighten. Words could not begin to express just how the bastard had thought to dominate him. But as he thought, he was also forced to remember the tiny shred of pleasure he'd felt. More than a shred, a sly voice insisted. He had to close his eyes as the memory of how hot and supple Kiba's mouth had been washed over him. Bastard he might be, but the could kiss. And that hand, the one Kiba had shoved down his pants, truth be told, he'd never been with anyone so forceful. Jugo had been bigger, but incredibly submissive, and Suigetsu was Suigetsu, an ant could dominate that freak. These had been the only options available to him and he'd made good use of them. Kiba was unlike them in every way possible. And the tiny flutter of pleasure the memory of Kiba's assault called up now suggested that were things different, he would allow his way. He'd submit. The anticipation this realization called up was unthinkable. A minute passed as Sasuke marveled at how disconnected this sneaky pleasure was from the rage he felt. That was neither here nor there, though, because he'd had it. Had enough of Naruto's shit, of Kiba, and this village. All of it. He'd have to act tonight, when his chakra was fully returned. Kiba would come, he'd finish him, his shame alone at being bested so thoroughly demanded it, then move directly to the real reason for why he'd come back in the first place. And then he would leave. Disappear permanently. He wondered if Naruto would have something to say about that. The blonde had certainly had something to say about the last time he'd left the village. A bark of laughter was startled out of Sasuke at the size of that understatement. Surprised, he wonderingly touched his fingertips to his mouth. He hadn't known what his own laugh sounded like. In fact, he couldn't remember doing it since before his family had died. He traced the lingering smile on his lips for a while, bemused. Then his smile faded. Naruto hated him. Now that his time in the village was coming to an end, Sasuke looked back on the months he'd spent here and frowned. If he'd been serious about befriending Naruto, why had he gone out of his way to annoy him? Why hadn't he just walked up to him and said what he had to say? Was he so prideful that he couldn't apologize, even if only to Naruto? The heat suffusing his face suggested that he was prideful and embarrassed. It wasn't in him to show humility. Besides which, he'd already concluded that he wasn't sorry for his actions. But you could apologize for treating him like shit. True. Thoughts of Naruto led to other thoughts. Unbidden, Kiba's words came to him. Of how his stalking of Naruto wasn't friendly behavior. Kiba had also commented on why he appeared jealous of Haku. He was jealous, that much he'd already admitted to himself, but in light of the comment about unfriendly behavior, Sasuke took the time now to pick apart his reasons for feeling that way. Not like he had anything else to do. It was a while before it dawned on him that he wasn't jealous of anyone else in Naruto's life. But then, no one else in Naruto's life was a love interest. Frown slowly deepening, Sasuke stared hard at the smooth surface of the steel ceiling. Kiba's remark about having romantic feelings for Naruto and wanting to him also came rushing back. Back then, he'd had the sure thought that he didn't have romantic feelings, and didn't want to Naruto. Alone now, With no one's bullshit distracting him, and already admitting other things to himself, it was as if a layer of self-delusion peeled itself away from his mind. It allowed him to see things he'd never really cared to discover. And having discovered them, he was reminded of why he hadn't cared to know this particular truth about himself. He had no time or inclination for entanglements. Period. But Naruto, do you love him? After many minutes, Sasuke concluded that he didn't. That was somehow a relief. And yet it also made him feel a twinge of regret. It would have been nice to discover that he had the ability to love, but the cold hard fact of it was that the only love he was ever likely to feel in his life was what he felt for his brother. And Itachi was dead. No, he didn't love Naruto, but he was very aware of how thoroughly he'd monopolized Naruto's attentions to date. He just preferred that Naruto be obsessed with him, than with anyone else. Did he have a reason for such lunacy? No, he thought, nor was he ashamed to admit it. Something about being Naruto's focus made him feel validated, and that was that. That's not good enough. Sasuke considered this. Not validated, no, wanted. Bereft of family, soon to be devoid of purpose, and incapable of love, it came to him that having Naruto's obsession was as close as he would get to any of those things. He would be alone in the world, adrift. He could take comfort in knowing that someone, somewhere, still thought of him and wanted him in some way. Maybe he didn't love Naruto or want to him, but he definitely wanted him. And maybe he wanted to be his friend for reasons other than wanting to honor Itachi. He would take that knowledge to the grave, of course. And continue to deny wanting or needing Naruto to the idiot's face should the topic ever come up. Though they'd started looking for the boys in early afternoon, it wasn't until the sun was setting that Naruto remembered the part of the note that Haku had felt was too vague. Berating himself now for not following his advice about changing it, Naruto switched directions. He landed on the bole of a tree, flipped, and pointed himself due west. Inari and Konohamaru clung to each other at reaching the crest of land that preceded the dip. What they found was a large hollow that seemed devoid of anything but slowly swirling mist and the hum. This close, they could feel it throbbing through their bodies like a second heartbeat. It was rhythmic, lulling. They drifted closer, sliding down the side of the hollow, without even realizing it. It seemed that the closer they went, the louder that humming throb became, until it was all they were aware of. The mist surrounded them as they reached the bottom of the hollow. It seemed that the sun set at the same moment that this happened, so that all was dark and cold. Konohamaru used what little chakra he had left to light a small branch. Using this makeshift torch, he looked around. For long moments all they saw was the mist. Everything was one shade of gray or another, and the hum was like a low pound that shuddered their bodies in time with it. Then, though visibility was limited, Konohamaru found the source. It appeared to be a large, fleshy oval several feet long. It looked like an egg, only it was black instead of white. It throbbed and quivered, and seemed to give off black tendrils of raw energy that undulated in the air in odd counterpoint to the humming. These went still as soon as Konohamaru spotted them, and then they began stretching forward to meet him. Oh, Konohamaru thought wildly. But that was when he became aware that the humming had now paralyzed him. Lulled into a stupor, he heard Inari whimper behind him, and guessed he'd come to the same conclusion. They were Ed. The tendrils seemed sentient, which would mean the thing they came from was too. Konohamaru struggled to move, straining against the hypnotic beat of that hum. He could feel himself becoming drowsy. It was like trying to think through syrup, if such a thing was possible. His mind grew sluggish, his breathing slowed down. It seemed nothing he did could dispel the lethargy creeping over him. He dropped to his knees along with Inari, as those black tendrils ghosted up to his face. A crash sounded next to him. Neither boy had the energy or the will to turn and look, but the light that emanated from Naruto's chakra blazed in the hollow. The slow, ponderous hum that had lured the boys in switched abruptly to high-pitched shrieking. It was like being dunked in ice water. Konohamaru and Inari's senses crashed back to an awareness of their surroundings as the paralysis broke. The adrenaline their bodies had been trying to incorporate flooded them, made them cry out at last, but by then several things were already happening. Whatever that quivering egg thing was, it now focused completely on Naruto as if it recognized him. The tendrils all went stiff as that shriek went on, almost loud enough to make their ears bleed. Then they rushed toward Naruto. They were fast. So fast that Konohamaru blinked and almost didn't see them. Naruto dodged, but was caught by an ankle by one tendril. As Konohamaru registered that the tendrils had enough substance to actually grab things, the others swarmed over Naruto's thrashing body and tore him apart. Inari screamed. No, Konohamaru thought. He was in a complete panic now, scrabbling up the side of that hollow as fast as he could, with Inari on hot his heels, but he'd caught the faint poof that meant a clone had been dispersed. Even as relief cramped his guts, fear drowned the relief, because those tendrils were coming after him and his hands and feet kept slipping on moldy leaves. A clone, Konohamaru thought, gritting his teeth as he slid yet again. A clone means boss knows where we are now and will come get us. By all the gods of heaven and hell, let him come quick, Konohamaru prayed. Something grabbed the back of his shirt, and he added his scream to Inari's. Information from a clone slammed through Naruto hard enough to have him miss his landing. He dropped heavily to all fours on the forest floor, panting. The images faded. He could feel the adrenaline and alarm transferred by the clone rocketing through him. The boys were in deadly trouble. He didn't have time to analyze what he'd been given. Instead, he wasted what felt like precious time figuring out how to contact Haku and have him meet him at the boy's location in the least amount of time. Toad. He'd never devised a jutsu from scratch in his life, and was not in the habit of altering the jutsu he did know. Moves, yes. Ninjutsu, never. Yet such was his desperation that a plan for one took shape in his mind. Summoning was the only form of space-time manipulation that he knew. Calling the seals up on the fly, Naruto summoned two toads. One was to reverse transport him to Konohamaru, who now had a contract with the toads. Without that contract, what he was doing probably wouldn't even be possible. The other toad he sent to Haku, which would then hopefully bring him to Naruto in the same manner. Both toads and Naruto disappeared a moment later in a cloud of smoke. It had only been Inari's hand that grabbed him. Kid was falling, had grabbed him, and now they were both slipping toward where those tendrils were now joining together to form a single thick limb. Climb. Konohamaru screamed. I can't, K. Inari was grabbed around the waist by that black arm and yanked backward. Help me. Konohamaru made a grab for him. He caught his sweaty hand, felt his grip slipping, and desperately tried to call up his chakra. Anything, even a trickle would have been welcome at this point. Inari was pulled out of his grasp, swung high into the air, then thrown down on top of him. Konohamaru tried to catch him, but only succeeded in leaving himself open for a stunning burst of pain. Bright sparks went off behind his lids and his world condensed around him, canceling out the noise and confusion, as he neared a faint. He both felt and heard something in his chest crack as a fountain of blood rose up the back of his throat. It splattered out of him on his choked scream. Inari was unconscious, he saw. That arm narrowed itself to a point. It reared up above them, as Konohamaru weakly coughed in agony. Every breath was a stab of pain, and Inari wasn't moving. The arm hovered, the tip curved toward them as if seeing them, and Konohamaru knew what was coming before it drove downward at him. He closed his eyes, and hoped it would be quick. At the last second, he groped for Inari's hand, where it lay limply across his stomach. There was a sound, a popping sound, followed by a grunt of pain, but the pain wasn't his. Konohamaru opened his eyes to find Naruto crouched over him. The end of the tendril protruded from his chest. Boss. Naruto grimaced. Go. His eyes shifted upward, toward the top of the hollow, where Konohamaru heard a faint poof over the renewed sound of the eggs shrieking. A moment later, Haku slid down beside them. His face was white, but his eyes and hands were steady as he gently lifted him and Inari each beneath an arm. Boss, Konohamaru cried. Boss, you're her. Take them away from here, Naruto said over him. He was already straightening up, trying to turn, to get that black arm out of him. Konohamaru only had eyes for the steady stream of blood dripping from his boss's mouth, and for how drained he looked. He felt Haku nodding. Naruto, Haku said. His eyes traveled over the malignant oval, the arm, everything. I can send them with a clone. No. Naruto choked back another mouthful of blood. They're hurt. A clone might encounter something else out here and get dispelled. They'd be alone, defenseless. Make sure. A shudder racked him, and his chakra mode blinked out. Naruto sagged to his knees, and that was all Konohamaru saw. Haku whirled and was zipping away so fast that he only had time to scream his boss's name once more before they were out of sight. I can't stop. The sooner I get you to the village, the sooner I can come back and help him, Haku muttered when Konohamaru beat a weak hand against his chest. I don't want to leave him any more than you do, but he's strong. I know he is. Trust him. Konohamaru dissolved into tears. Haku moved faster, undaunted by the weight of either boy. Naruto had to shake his head to clear it. He could see, but his vision was fading in and out. The thing in his torso throbbed rhythmically, and each time it did, his body reacted, and his vision and hearing dimmed. Haku will see them safe, he thought. Thank God one of his clones had already been looking down this path for the boys before he remembered to do so himself, or he might not have made it in time. As it was, the shrieking. His head felt like it weighed a ton, but he managed to lift it and squint toward that roundish shape emitting it. His bones trembled with it. He had no idea what that thing was, but it was siphoning off his chakra at an alarming rate, he could see. What chakra remained to him struggled against the intrusion of that black arm, trying to repair the damage done to his body, but it was no use. And now that he was looking, he could see the way the egg was feeding off him. Both it and the arm were growing lighter, infused with his power, so that now they were a mottled brown, with faint patches of yellow, instead of black. Try as he might, and his will was enormous, he could not pull that thing out of him, or stop it from ing him dry. It was killing him. A roar left him as he tried to call up enough chakra for a clone. Rasengan could be used to sever the tendril in him, but he didn't even have enough chakra for that. Something so simple as a clone, a move he could do in his sleep, with hardly more effort than it took to breathe, was beyond him now. Shouldn't have let it touch me. That had been unavoidable. At the time, he'd known that a clone wouldn't have been an acceptable obstacle, and there had been no time for him to use any other substitute. He'd assumed he would be able to heal once he'd taken the injury, but there he'd been wrong. I'd do it again, too. Iruka did the same for me. Now I guess I know why. Naruto suddenly found himself on his side. He'd keeled over and now he was being dragged. His mind was a mess of confusion, but he was aware still. Enough to understand that he was feeling no pain now, that the thing in him was connected to every part of him. It overrode his nervous system, as well as muddled his thoughts. His urge to resist was wavering. He could hear Kurama roaring, calling his name, but it was so faint, and then that too was gone. He was still being pulled, dragged through damp leaves in his own blood, and he had no idea, none whatsoever, just what was going on other than that he was dying. Strong as he was, and as much as he'd overcome, he was dying at the hands of something he didn't even have a name for. He was close to the egg thing now. Sleepy, almost deaf, nearly blind, he could nevertheless make out the sight of more tendrils rising up from that fleshy thing and reaching for him. Naruto. There it was again. His name being yelled. It wasn't Kurama this time, though. Couldn't be. Kurama never called him Dobi, or said things like, trust you to land your stupid in this mess. He just had time to make out Sasuke flying at the egg thing with his sword drawn, soaring right over his body to drive the point of his blade at the tendril dragging him. But one of the other tendrils, the newer and smaller ones, lashed through the air, and Sasuke disappeared in a wisp of smoke. A hallucination. Sasuke would never rescue me like that. Sasuke was grimly contemplating Kiba's shirt and whether or not he should use it again, when his head snapped up. All thoughts of Kiba left his mind. The guard stationed at the solitary cell stifled another yawn behind his hand. Bored out of his mind, he reached beneath his little table, glanced around to make sure the next guard wasn't coming in yet, and pulled out the latest issue of BBB, Bodacious and Butts. He didn't even have a chance to open the magazine before a stray shard of steel flew from out behind him and pierced his skull. He was dead before he hit the floor. Kiba smiled as he cloaked himself completely, masking his chakra and any sense of his person from detection. He was just outside the fenced area that housed the underground detention cells. Once cloaked, he adjusted the basket of food and drinks he was carrying over one arm, and prepared to leap the fence. He was thrown back by a blast of what felt like fire and wind. Pain slashed at his forearms where they were crossed over his face, and his back felt like it snapped in two when it slammed into what felt like a stone wall. It was a tree, he saw when he managed to roll over. His back was not broken, and the pain in his arms seemed to have been caused by stray shards of metal. A thin sliver of it was embedded in his skin. He winced while pulling it out, but was already looking around for his attacker. He saw no one. Where the detention cells had been hidden underground was now a large smoking hole. Kiba slowly got to his feet. Some huge lavender monster of chakra exploded from that hole, knocking Kiba flat on his again. Behind the cover of one arm, Kiba could just make out Sasuke in the center of that thing. It was gone almost as soon as he registered this, bounding over the detention area, and completely out of sight. Kiba blinked in shock. Susanoo. In the aftermath of Sasuke's escape, the area was deathly still. Then he heard shouting in the distance. Faint. His hearing was shot. Anbu. He could smell them. Sasuke's scent was heavier, though. Checking to see that he was still masked, Kiba lurched into a jog, following the storm of uprooted trees and flying leaves that marked Sasuke's headlong dash. Susanoo wasn't the easiest thing to hold under the best of circumstances. It was even worse when your chakra wasn't 100%, Sasuke noted. He'd likely damaged himself in some way by forcing his pathways open in order to call out Susanoo, but there'd been no help for it. Whatever. It might not be complete, but it would have to do. What information he'd managed to glean from the confusion of images he'd gotten from his clone suggested that he would need every ounce of power he could summon. That clone. He'd become so used to maintaining it and having it follow Naruto that he'd all but forgotten it. It had become a ritual for him to form one each morning when he went to the bathroom and cloak it. Thinking of the brief assessment of the situation his clone had conducted, Sasuke narrowed his eyes and pushed himself harder. That idiot better not die before I get there. Naruto wasn't dead. Glutted on his chakra, the egg thing was changing. It was now able to fill the entire hollow with its malevolent energy. This black miasma hung like a cloudy dome over the hollow so that Naruto was enveloped in it, and thus drained of life even faster. Having found a shred of his trademark stubbornness, he grimly hung onto his consciousness with one hand dug deep into the dirt. His face was set, and his teeth bared, as he tried to resist being pulled any farther. It didn't matter, not really. He was being drained regardless. It felt as though all of Kurama's chakra was being ed out of him. What kept him alive now was his own chakra and will to live. Defenseless as he was not giving in. But he was still being dragged toward that thing. He had a bug's eye view of the hollow, where his cheek rested on a patch of damp leaves. Just then, Naruto tried to call up Haku's face. Kiba's, Sakura's, any one of his friends. No one came to his struggling mind, not even his mother and father. He thought they, at least, would be there in his final moments, the way they'd been there at previous crises in his life. No, nothing. His eyelids were growing heavy, and he could hear his heartbeat now, getting slower and slower as his feet made contact with that egg. They immediately went numb, and he understood that once the egg swallowed him whole, he'd be finished. I'm really dying, he thought with wonder. Mom. Dad. Ero Sennin. Sasuke. Naruto tried to smile. Sasuke's face was somehow the last one he expected to see, and yet the only one he wanted to see before he died. Things felt unfinished between them. Even if it was a figment of his dying mind, Naruto figured he could say what he had to say. He tried to focus on Sasuke's face. It seemed very far away, and it wasn't giving a welcoming smile in return, or wreathed in heavenly light the way he thought it would be, but it was there just the same. And it was speaking to him. Huh. His voice came out sounding whispery soft. Sasuke cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled again. Naruto. He couldn't tell if Naruto was aware or not. It was hard to see him through that black cloud, and the odd light around him was very dim. He stood just above the hollow now, watching as some things seemed to be eating Naruto alive, and thinking feverishly. Susanoo had been needed in order for him to break out of that steel cell, but he'd let it go soon afterward. Another few inches of Naruto's legs disappeared into that thing, and he came to a decision. Having already tested the black cloud with the side of one hand, Sasuke knew that whatever energy comprised it was highly destructive. How Naruto was surviving along as he was while surrounded by it was a mystery, but Sasuke didn't think he'd last too long himself. His hand was tingling unpleasantly. Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu. Haku, Tsunade, and several Anbu agents pulled up just as Sasuke released numerous huge fireballs into the atmosphere. The heat of them was prodigious, crisping the fine hairs on their arms and cracking the skin on their faces, even removed from direct contact as they were. Haku could make out the shape of a dragon on each of the fireballs, but had no time to study them further as Tsunade called Sasuke's name. She switched to a shouted warning for all of them to take cover. There was a whoosh, a backlash of heat that dwarfed even what the fireballs had put out, and Haku looked up from where he'd thrown himself to see black flames devouring the black cloud of energy as if it were nothing. Amaterasu, he thought in shock. He, along with everyone else, had gotten a glimpse of Naruto and his plight before they'd taken cover. His methods might be extreme, but Haku couldn't fault Sasuke for employing them. Naruto wouldn't be in such dire straits unless he was completely overpowered. And if Naruto could be taken down so easily, the rest of them didn't have a hope of helping him. Haku looked at Sasuke and thought, he can save Naruto, we can't. Once the hollow was free and clear of the cloud, Sasuke let Amaterasu die. He started to run forward. There was just the fleshy sack now, with Naruto half submerged in it, but tendrils materialized from it and arrowed toward him. Analyzing as he ran, Sasuke reasoned that dodging would be pointless. More tendrils were appearing. Naruto screamed, as he was drained even more to facilitate this response. Bracing himself, Sasuke called up Susanoo once more, called it up completely this time, and took a flying leap. He could see where the tendrils, dozens of them, wrapped around his jutsu, but he landed and grabbed Naruto's outstretched hand. The moment his chakra made contact with the tendrils, the pain of Susanoo intensified and immediately began draining off. The way some kind of low-grade hum pulsed throughout the jutsu seemed to lull his senses, but he held tightly to Naruto's hand and focused on the pain. It kept his mind from being put into a trance, and his attention sharp. Naruto. Ooh. Naruto blinked slowly, forcing himself to see despite his fading vision. Sasuke wasn't a figment of his stuttering mind, he realized. It was really him, he was really there, closer than before. Holding his hand, squeezing it. Feeling the strength of that grip, Naruto felt a ghost of his own senses return. Sasuke. Can you hear me? Sasuke's voice was faint, though he was right there. Yes, he tried to yell, but his own voice was soundless to his ears, and he simply didn't have the energy. But Sasuke heard him. He could tell by how his face set into determined lines and his grip tightened. And now that he was really looking, he could see Susanoo, huge and crackling all around Sasuke, and the way it seemed to flicker. He could also feel, via his connection to the thing, how it was actively working against Sasuke. It knows Sasuke means to help me. The idea of being swallowed by something that was so aware filled him with dread and panic, to the point where his mind cleared even more. Enough for him to resume his fight. He tightened his own grip on Sasuke, reaching to grab Sasuke's other hand as well, as his knees were swallowed and went numb. Unbelievably, Sasuke gave a grimace that Naruto realized was meant to be an encouraging smile. That's it, Dobi. Hang on. Sasuke. Pull. TCH. Sasuke didn't waste his strength arguing that he was pulling. He kept his mind on one thing only. If I lose Susanoo, we're both dead. And Susanoo was quickly being destroyed. It hacked at the tendrils as quickly as they were being formed, but more only followed. It's feeding off my chakra as well as his. Exclamation mark. A quick glance showed the hollow to be swarming with tendrils now, which explained why no one else had followed him in. He could sense attacks being hurled at them, but he could also feel the little infusions of chakra the tendrils derived from these, and how much stronger it was getting second by second. He and Naruto were now at the center of miniature forest of the tendrils. They didn't have much time at this rate, and yet he had to wait. Stop attacking, he yelled over his shoulder. You're only giving it more power. The Hokage and Anbu heard and understood. They circled the hollow. What is he waiting for? Tsunade said tensely. She could just make out, through the multitude of swarming coils, where the two boys lay. At least the reach of that thing seemed to be finite. If she and the others stayed out of the hollow, the coils and tendrils couldn't reach them. Sasuke, she yelled. Get Naruto out of there. Sasuke ignored her. What is that thing? She asked the agents around her. How is it that such a thing can exist so close to us without anyone ever encountering it before now? The agents had no answers for her. She watched impatiently, her blood hot and primed to wade in, but Sasuke was right. Besides, if they unleashed a powerful move that was nonetheless not strong enough to destroy it, it would only kill Naruto faster in its attempt to defend itself. As it was, Sasuke seemed to be holding off from having Susanoo destroy it for that very same reason, but then why didn't he extract Naruto already? I should go in, she fretted. My healing. Negative, Aburame Shibi countered. He was one of the elite Junin who'd been present when Haku's clone had delivered its urgent message. My Kikai have already deduced that the anomaly in question would only drain you of the ability to heal. You'll die. Naruto is dying. Damn it. Throughout this conversation she did not take her eyes off where he lay panting and quivering in Sasuke's grip. If he's lasted this long, then I can. He is Uzumaki. This time it was Kakashi who spoke, another who'd been present when the message had come. His physical ability to withstand trauma is a lot higher than yours. And we need a Hokage, especially now when the entire ninja world is still reeling from the effects of war. Let us see what Sasuke can do, Shibi said. He didn't add that they needed her more than they needed Sasuke, but the sentiment was still heard by all present. They watched in dread, as the minutes crawled by. Haku, sensitive to the atmosphere by dint of his nature, began to understand what Sasuke was doing and silently cheered him on. Naruto could see firsthand just what Sasuke's efforts were costing him. He could see how the tendrils were now actively trying to peel Susanoo away from Sasuke's body, trying to get at the boy within. He could feel the strain the egg went through to divert its strength to this task, even as it ed Sasuke of his chakra. Eyes red, mouth grim, sweating and bleeding from one nostril, Sasuke not only maintained Susanoo, but managed to keep tugging on Naruto as well, and thus keep him from being swallowed completely. He knelt there before Naruto with this agonizing struggle plain in the snarl on his face. Naruto thought his heart would break. Sasuke, who'd given him nothing but rejection, and for whom he'd bled for 4 long years, this was the same guy risking his life to save him now. As the egg slowly swallowed his hips, he kept his eyes on Sasuke. Willing him to succeed, silently begging him not to give up even as the trickle beneath Sasuke's nose grew thicker and became a steady stream. When Sasuke's eye also began bleeding, Naruto bit his lip. All hatred and resentment were gone now in the face of what seemed to be their certain destruction. And there, in those minutes, he found it in him to believe in Sasuke one last time. No one who went through this much trouble for a former teammate could be all bad. Sasuke was fast approaching his limit. His vision was blurry, and his grip on Naruto's hands was slipping. Naruto could see Susanoo fading now, being ed away despite Sasuke's best efforts to maintain it. No, he whispered. Ooh. Susanoo was formless, little more than its ribs around him, but Sasuke clung to this too. The egg was getting stronger. He was being dragged inexorably as Naruto's body was consumed even faster. He tugged harder, but to no avail. And seriously, he didn't have the strength to spare to drag him out of the grip of that thing. He met Naruto's eyes. They were droopy, glazed with pain, but still steady on his face. He could all but feel the faith Naruto was putting in him, and finally he thought it was time. He freed one hand. Hang on to me, he said. Don't let go. I'm not, Naruto hiccuped. Don't you let go. Never. For a moment, Sasuke seemed about to say something else. His frown softened, and his eyes traveled over Naruto's face. Naruto, but then, in spite of their joint struggle against it, Naruto was ed in another inch. Then another. Sasuke, he quavered. His eyes closed and two fat tears rolled down his filthy face. I'm here. Look at me. Naruto. Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes, and Sasuke was there. He was beautiful to him. Bloody and sweaty and pale as he was, Naruto had never seen anything more beautiful. Do you trust me? Sasuke said. Naruto could see lightning forming in Sasuke's free hand. He nodded. Yeah, when I tell you, call up whatever chakra you can. But I don't have. Just do it, Sasuke said. He then released Naruto completely, got to his feet, and shot his lightning-covered hand into the air. Thick bars of answering lightning spider webbed across the stormy sky. Sasuke's hand acted as a conduit to this overwhelming display. The air reeked of ozone, and Sasuke could just make out the sound of the Hokage urging everyone to run. Naruto's scream brought his eyes downward in time to see him being entirely swallowed by the egg, and he reasoned he could wait no more. Come! Kirin erupted from the cloud cover, borne on the current of lightning Sasuke directed, and catapulted straight for the egg. Now, Naruto! Sasuke screamed. Inside the egg, Naruto thought he was dead. He'd been swallowed the moment Sasuke let him go, and all feeling in him had ceased to exist. His entire body had gone numb, and the tendril inside him that was simultaneously killing him and keeping him alive, began to on the rest of his life energy in earnest. Then he heard Sasuke's shout. At the same time, pain exploded along his nerve endings as the egg received some massive attack, something Sasuke was doing to it. Through his connection to the thing, he was able to feel its pain and shock, and an elementary understanding came to him that this thing had been engineered for people like him, people who were vessels. There was a break in the thing's pulse. A skip in its hypnotic rhythm that allowed Naruto to feel a glimmer of his chakra and power where it was being used by the egg. Comprehension flooded his mind just as Sasuke's attack, whatever it was, seemed to rip the egg apart. He grasped the tendril in both hands, reversing his link with it so that now he was the one invading it, and somehow managed to latch onto his power at the same time. He pulled with every particle of himself. Eden drew on his chakra, leeching it from the thing, as it finally lost its hold on him in a blazing outburst of agony so intense that Naruto screamed along with it. Screamed and screamed until something familiar heated his insides, and Kurama's voice was there, inside him once more. He was speaking to him, but Naruto didn't understand anything. He was blind and deaf to all but the searing pain, and his lock-jawed determination to yank back every shred of his chakra. And then, blessedly, he could feel Kurama's power returning as well. It swelled in him, dulling the pain, rectifying the damage, until it was the fox that was siphoning his chakra and Naruto's from the egg. It seemed to those watching from the cover of a chakra barrier Anbu had thrown up that everything happened at once. Kirin roared down at the egg. The egg resisted destruction for a moment that lasted an eternity, then Kyuubi's chakra exploded from the egg to cut off its wailing scream. At the same moment, Susanoo reformed in its entirety in time to protect Sasuke from the backlash of chakra and flames that briefly engulfed the hollow. Then all was smoke and ozone and deep, velvety silence. They remained behind the barrier, watchful and alert. Feeling returned first. He could feel that his body was intact, and that he was okay, but incredibly weak. That would pass, though. Already, he could feel his chakra restoring him to a full recovery. The horror of the egg was even now fading. He was still and quiet while it happened, and just enjoyed the sound of the thudding heartbeat beneath his ear and the feel of solid arms around him. Naruto's eyes flew open. He was cradled in Sasuke's arms. They were standing. He couldn't remember standing up. He couldn't remember anything. The last thing he'd been aware of was the egg being attacked by Sasuke, and the pain that had caused him. Kurama rumbled inside him. An image came to him, of him being temporarily controlled by the fox, enough to get his body back to normal and break free of the egg. Kurama had retreated, though, whether by his own will or the nature of his Torii seal, and his body had collapsed. Apparently Sasuke had caught him. For a few seconds, all he could feel was how tightly Sasuke held him. Other things registered with him slowly, like the way Sasuke's hot breath blew down on his hair, and how Sasuke himself seemed to be a bit unsteady. He could hear people in the distance, calling his name, but Sasuke was holding him and it was all he could think about. It was all he'd ever wanted in the world, for Sasuke to acknowledge how much he cared about him. Remembering how hard Sasuke had fought to save him, Naruto turned his face into Sasuke's neck. It came to him, with some embarrassment, that the breadth and height of Sasuke was disturbingly pleasant to feel. The voices were closer now. Sasuke's arms began to loosen, but Naruto clung to him, unwilling to let go just yet now that Sasuke had finally acknowledged him. One moment. Just one moment more, then he'd let go. Ooh. In the stillness immediately following Naruto's collapse into his arms, Sasuke was keenly aware of his weight. The smell of him, the feel of him, and the fierce and crushing sense of possessiveness he felt. He squeezed without meaning to, and Naruto stirred. After a moment he knew Naruto was awake and felt sure, despite the connection they'd seemed to share when he was rescuing him, that Naruto would pull away in disgust. He could see where the Hokage and everyone else were racing back to them, but Naruto chose that moment to turn into him. And when he caught sight of Haku staring at them with large, wounded eyes and tried to release him completely, Naruto only held him tighter. He looked down as Naruto finally did step back, and saw the regretful look on his face. That was a surprise. He pulled Naruto in and held onto him, letting all and sundry know that he wasn't letting go, not for anything, and Naruto returned the embrace. Was actually hugging him back. He could feel Naruto's heart hammering away in his chest. But then Tsunade was there, pulling them apart and passing her hands over them in quick assessment. Get them to the hospital, she barked. Then she spun away to investigate, along with Anbu, the remains of the egg. The spell was broken. He watched Haku approaching Naruto, who allowed himself to be led away. Agents landed around him, already issuing orders for him to come with them, but he had eyes only for where Naruto paused to glance behind himself. Their eyes locked for one long second, and then Naruto was letting Haku support him and guide him back to the village. Shizune jogged to keep up with Tsunade's ground-eating strides. The older woman marched with furious purpose down the hospital corridor. Medics and under-medics hastened to leap out of the Hokage's way. The thundercloud of disapproval on her face did not bode well for anyone she chose to take notice of. I want a detailed report on that anomaly waiting for me in my office the second I get back, Tsunade growled. Shizune whimpered a reply, and disappeared to see it done. Refraining from kicking the door to the hospital room, Tsunade instead shoved it open as she entered. The fear on Konohamaru and Inari's faces did her heart good. She leveled a stare at Tazuna, where he hovered at Inari's bedside, and Sakura, who'd been the one to treat the boys while she'd gone to see to Naruto's rescue. Both Tazuna and Sakura wisely and silently stepped to the far side of the room. Only then did Tsunade release the door and approach the sickbeds. Her assessment was quick and thorough. Sakura had done a good job, which she indicated with a slight sniff. Anything less than perfection from her student wasn't accepted, and Sakura adhered to this rule well. Satisfied, she crossed her arms and pinned the boys with hard stares. Start talking. Terrified, Konohamaru and Inari spilled their guts without the slightest hesitation. Ooh, Naruto was next. Sakura had evidently concluded that he didn't need her direct supervision, since he was alone in his room. Someone had provided him with a bowl of ramen, Tsunade saw. He yelped and tipped it over in his surprise when she barged into his room. She ignored his bleats and curses of pain, waited until he'd thrown the scalding sheet off his legs, and continued to wait in fuming silence until he'd fanned his reddened skin with a hand. When he was finally still, she went over and performed an assessment of him as well. As expected, she could find nothing wrong with his body, not now that several hours had passed since the incident. His chakra showed evidence of being drained, but it was even now replenishing itself. Naruto lay meek and quiet while she worked. Tsunade smacked him soundly across the face with the back of one hand, then spun away from him to pace the small room as he picked himself up from the floor. Naruto weakly crawled back into his bed. What was that for? He whined. The clueless reproach on his face sorely tempted her to hit him again, but she folded her arms, much as she had when interrogating Konohamaru and Inari. Let's start with illicit training sessions in the forest. With an unranked boy and a genin. A-ranked jutsu. Unauthorized territory being used in an unspecified mission, and issued by another genin without my knowledge or consent. Does any of that ring a bell? They told on me. Naruto's eyes were round. Tsunade's jaw flexed dangerously. Naruto shrank back from that look. I'm not just a genin, he muttered. I'm also a sage. We never had any problems out there till today. They wanted to learn and I taught them. I don't see what the big deal is. I mean, okay, maybe the A-rank stuff should have been saved for later, but I don't know any B or C class junk. Tsunade blinked. There isn't a shred of forethought in you, is there? She breathed. You've grown tremendously, especially during the war and the events leading up to it, but you don't see the danger of your actions, do you? That thing. Don't you think, Tsunade interrupted, that if you were ready to handle a team, you'd have one? Once you make Chunin, you will have a team. A Chunin has been tested, and thus is known to be trusted with the lives of others. A Chunin shows maturity, wisdom. These are things looked for in the Chunin exam. You are not Chunin, so don't bitch at me about your generosity in teaching two boys who are clearly just as senseless as you are. Stung. Naruto blinked back tears. You trusted me with the lives of others during the war. He lashed out. You were counting on me then. That was war. A wise leader uses the weapons at her disposal, and you are undeniably a powerful weapon, but you are not ready to lead. Not even close. A small gasp left Naruto. Granny had always believed in him. Hearing her essentially call him immature really hurt. Hating her intensely in that moment, he turned away and stared at where his bull lay on the floor. Tsunade regretted speaking so harshly, but it was the truth and had to be said. Naruto's head was swollen in the aftermath of the war, no doubt. The sooner he understood the lesson that he had to learn to follow before he could lead, the better. You're to stay overnight for observation, she said softly. And this discussion isn't over. Ooh. By the time she reached Sasuke's room, Tsunade's fury had simmered down to mere anger. She found him sitting up in his bed, still and watchful, as a medic fussed with the chakra monitoring machine he was hooked up to. The medic quickly bowed and backed away as she walked closer, and studied the digital reading on the monitor's screen. She verified what she was seeing with a manual assessment of Sasuke's pathways. She also thumbed his eyelids wider apart and used her chakra-coated fingertips to delve his eyes. I was not aware that one in possession of eternal Mangekyo could suffer damage to the eyes when employing Susanoo, she murmured. Normally one wouldn't, Sasuke said. Holding Susanoo while an outside force is working to dispel it is a different matter. How bad is the damage? Moderate. The damage to your pathways is bit more serious. Had you only molded and used your chakra normally after forcing them open, the harm you did yourself wouldn't have been so bad. You broke through your pathway's seal by way of Susanoo, however, itself a powerfully destructive jutsu to maintain. I fear the injury you've done yourself may be permanent. Permanent? What do you mean? She stepped back from him and let her chakra fade. I mean some of your pathways may remain closed, never to open again. You'll find that some of your jutsu aren't as powerful as they once were, or may not form correctly at all. A practical evaluation of your skill set will need to be made before a final diagnosis is given, but based on what I'm seeing, it doesn't look good. Sasuke stared at her a moment, then gazed at his chakra monitor. It was very like a heart monitor, only this machine showed 3 lines. One for the high points in his chakra, one for the low, and the median line that averaged the two. Permanent damage. I strongly suggest you get as much rest as possible over the course of the next week, she continued as she was leaving. We'll discuss your violations and how you came to know Naruto was in trouble then. Damn, I can't tell her about that clone. He didn't see any way around it, though. When do I get the practical evaluation? He said, halting her as she pulled his door open. He needed to know just what he could do and how well he could do it. His plan to leave had only been postponed as far as he was concerned. That has yet to be determined. She left him alone to lean pensively against his pillows. Shizune had Anbu waiting in her office and a cup of sake-spiked coffee on her desk when Tsunade wearily dropped into her chair. She reached for the cup first thing, and closed her eyes on an inhalation of appreciation as the liquid went down. Only when she'd taken an additional moment to let it hit her system did she lean back, open her eyes, and fix her subordinates with a beady glare. Report, she snapped. The Anbu captain himself stepped forward and went to one knee before her desk. Hokage-sama. 2 units of specialists have been dispatched to the site of the anomaly, as ordered. Their report is incomplete as yet, but we are confident. What is it? Tsunade barked. We don't know, the captain said. Only that it is not natural. It was engineered, apparently with the specific function of responding to Biju chakra. The consensus is that it is something left behind during the war by an opposing faction. And how? Tsunade grated, pinching the bridge of her nose, have patrols managed to miss coming across this thing before now? There was a pause. Actually, the last patrol to pass that section of the forest never returned. A report was filed, but seeing as we were at war. Silence. Tsunade moved to stand at her window and gaze out over the village. The sky was just starting to turn gray in the east. I can't afford oversights like this, she hissed. Nothing is to go overlooked or unresolved, is that clear? It is, Hokage-sama. It's destroyed. There's no hope of it repairing itself. None whatsoever. Whatever it was, it won't be troubling us again. Tsunade turned and swept her eyes over the captain and the 3 agents standing behind him. She addressed the captain. I want the full report on my desk in 3 days' time. You may leave. He was gone in an instant. The 3 agents remaining automatically went to their knees in his absence, and waited. Tsunade signaled her desire for a refill and waited until Shizune had done so and left the office, before speaking to the agent in the middle, the one with a wolf's mask. I've read your reports on Sasuke, she said, sipping quietly. What do you make of his actions tonight? Wolf spoke for some time. There were quite a few insights in his report that had Tsunade staring out her window again in deep thought. The unfortunate truth of her dilemma with Sasuke was that in spite of his more or less model behavior, she simply could not bring herself to trust him. She'd wrestled with her decision to allow him back into the village, and still lost sleep over it on occasion. By law, and in the interest of fairness, she was doing with him exactly what should be done, but her instincts screamed in warning. Wolf's revelations just might provide a way for her to uphold her decision to let Sasuke resume his citizenship, while also heeding her instincts. At this point, she would take any opportunity that presented itself. Naruto's funk only lasted a few minutes. As soon as Granny left the room, a swarm of medics bustled inside and took his blood and vital stats. He was given another bowl of ramen, and made to sit in the room's only chair while his bed linen was whisked off. It was replaced with fresh sheets and a blanket. He was then helped back into bed as if he were a helpless child who was terminally ill. The mess on the floor was removed in a blink. When all was made right in the room, the medics shyly approached him with shining eyes and asked for his autograph. He gave it. The men left, but the female among them bent to his ear and whispered that she'd sneak in more ramen for him if he wanted it. She then dashed away, face scarlet at receiving his smile of thanks. Comfortable now, Naruto scrunched down beneath his blanket and stared at the sliver of night he could see through the curtains at the window. His overstimulated mind drifted for a while on idle thoughts, before rewinding the night's events. He supposed this was inevitable. He would have bet his life that Uchiha Sasuke wouldn't have pissed on him if he was on fire, but here he was, alive and kicking, and it was all thanks to him. For a minute, he tried to call up all the negative feelings Sasuke's name usually inspired, but they just wouldn't come. And when they didn't, he resolutely faced the fact that he only wanted the comfort of that shield so that he could avoid thinking about how he really felt. The memory of Sasuke's face when they'd been holding each other's hands, of him saying, "Hang on," and the way his nose and eye had bled, that left Naruto swallowing in embarrassment, but it was the hug afterward, or whatever you wanted to call it, that did him in. The embrace had gone on a bit too long to really be called a hug, and had been far too intimate as well. Naruto didn't think he'd ever even held Haku as intently as Sasuke had held him. He buried his face in his pillow with a groan. Haku. He turned on his back and stared around the room. It was all starting to hit him now, everything that had happened. Nearly dying, and the horror of that thing. Sasuke. His feelings. Sasuke's actions. His body began trembling, and Naruto hugged himself beneath the blanket. First and foremost, he told himself stubbornly, he had no feelings for Sasuke. Sasuke had offered him friendship, Sasuke had displayed said willingness to be friends by saving his hide, and that was as far as that went. He'd woken up in Sasuke's arms because he'd been unable to stand on his own, but there was nothing more to it, he thought repressively. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And there would never be anything. Ever. Period. Remembering how pathetically he'd clung to Sasuke during that hug left his stomach roiling. He'd left himself open for a crushing rejection right then. That Sasuke hadn't done anything but let him cling didn't make one bit of difference, Naruto fumed. He'd decided to give Sasuke another shot, but that didn't mean he forgave him for everything. Fuzzy memories of him doing just that when he'd been half swallowed by that thing tried to push their way to the front of his mind. Naruto slammed the door on those thoughts. The point was, he decided as he worked himself into a healthy dose of denial, that Sasuke had a lot to answer for, and saving him didn't erase all that. It only meant that he'd accept the friendship, if it was still on the table. An image of Sasuke's arms around him surfaced again, and he turned his head to get away from it. He saw Haku standing in his room's doorway and felt a glad smile of relief and welcome split his face. Haku was warmth and light and love. The antithesis of all that he'd been through tonight, and the cure for every negative thought he was plagued with. Seeing his slight form and wan smile, Naruto felt a burst of happiness in his chest, a feeling that lit him from within and caused the shadowy thoughts of Sasuke to evaporate entirely. Haku had been made to wait until the Hokage had conducted her examination of Naruto before he could enter. He'd been standing outside the room when she swept in, and consequently had heard her assessment of Naruto's judgment. It was an assessment he privately agreed with. She'd sailed back out again, spared a single, narrowed glance for him, then disappeared down the hall. He'd waited where he was while medics had rushed in after her. When they left some time later, He'd stood at the door and watched Naruto, who didn't seem to notice him. He'd stared at the younger boy for a long time. Naruto's frown of thought tugged at his heart, but he made no move to enter. He wondered what Naruto was thinking, if the fear that must have been with him when he'd been with that thing was still upon him. He wondered many things as he watched Naruto tossing on the bed. Most of all, he studied the entire convoluted puzzle of Naruto and thought he at last understood him fully. Enough to reconcile the hurt he was feeling, at any rate, and that only enough so that he was able to step into the room when Naruto saw him, and put a weak smile on his face. He couldn't reconcile everything, but he did not hold anything against Naruto, who, after all, hadn't really done anything wrong. No, it was Sasuke who was to blame. Ooh, Naruto pounded the mattress near his hip. Come here, oh my god. Haku sat. Naruto dragged him into a fierce hug and just hung on, putting his head on Haku's shoulder. I shouldn't have left you, Haku managed after a moment. Someone had to get the boys to safety. Naruto's voice was muffled, and it allowed you to send Sasuke on ahead, which was brilliant, by the way. I can't even begin to thank you for that. It was really you who saved my life, not him. Haku debated correcting this error in Naruto's thinking, but he'd long since surmised that the only way Sasuke could have known Naruto was in trouble and gotten to him as quickly as he had was through a clone. This, on top of everything else, had Haku's eyes flat and dark with a look Zabuza would have recognized. But Naruto didn't see. There were a lot of things Naruto didn't see, or chose not to see. I'm just glad you're all right, he murmured. Yet he couldn't stop himself from comparing the hug he was receiving now to the one Naruto had given Sasuke only hours before. The tiny crack that had developed in the center of him when he'd seen Sasuke holding Naruto widened a little bit. Naruto pulled back, but held on to Haku's shoulders. He gave them a little squeeze. Me too. And listen, about what we were discussing before. You're right, and we should have our relationship defined. I'm totally ready to be your boyfriend. I'll be whatever you want. He stopped a moment and considered his words carefully. If he played his cards right, he could have everything. Haku is his love, and Sasuke is his friend. You're the best thing in my life. The best thing that has ever been in my life, and I don't want to lose that. You. I want you with me forever. Okay. He gave a lopsided grin. Will you be my boyfriend? I don't care who knows anymore, I just want you. Well, say something. Haku stared at him. He really is a boy, with no forethought, and no hindsight either. He understood how Naruto could be so hesitant about this subject this morning, and now so accepting of the idea. He did, but that didn't mean he could answer Naruto's question, so he didn't. The hospital settled down after its excitement, so that by the time Tsunade was receiving the end of Wolf's long-winded report, and dawn was on the horizon, the corridors were silent as a tomb. Wolf and his two comrades walked up to relieve the agents who'd filled in for them while they'd been with the Hokage. They took up their positions outside Sasuke's room after peeking in and ascertaining that he was sound asleep. Wolf settled into a crouch outside the door, facing his companions, and prepared for a long day ahead. Ooh, it wasn't so much a sound that made him turn his head to the side some time later, as it was a subtle yet unmistakable shift in the air currents. He saw a smallish figure and the glint of fading moonlight on steel, before his vision went dark, and he was collapsing sideways. Haku had delivered all three Senbon simultaneously, so all the agents slumped where they were without so much as a word of protest. He waited a beat, feeling out their vital rhythms. Deeply unconscious. Good. Moving silently, he pushed open Sasuke's door. He hadn't been on the offensive like this in years, doing so without his mask felt decidedly strange. As if he was exposed. He slipped to the foot of Sasuke's bed regardless, and stared at the composed features. Ooh. Sasuke was catapulted to full wakefulness at feeling a sharp pinch in his neck.